This happens all the time. Family dinner, somebody decided to not practice their religion anymore. Literally don't talk to each other anymore.
What we're often doing is we're misdiagnosing the problem.
Thayne.
Doctorate in Instructional Technology and Learning Sciences.
All of us want to think that when we're persuaded, it's entirely due to the merits of the argument. We're both looking at the same stuff, and you find something that's incredibly compelling, and I find something incredibly hollow. Whether you're being persuaded out of faith or into faith.
This could be political, this could be spiritual, this could be religious. What is it that would cause someone to be convinced while another person wouldn't be convinced?
There are non-rational factors at play in any moment of persuasion. We start to talk past each other, but we're really not talking about the arguments. We're actually talking about the sentiments.
You see divided families.
There are people I can't talk politics anymore. We're misdiagnosing the problem. Oh, the problem is that you're under the sway of these fallacious rational arguments. So if I can show you that your evidence is not as sound as you think, then I can convince you, right? There is no prayer. God, I think, is more willing and ready to answer to something like this. You can have the strongest arguments in the world. They're not going to change their mind. What's going to change their mind is many of us know people in our lives who have gone and they've read the CES letter and they've come back with grave concerns about the church and its history and the Book of Mormon and the history of the Book of Mormon. And they find the arguments in this book to be quite compelling. And then you might go to the same book and you read these same arguments and they ring hollow to you. They're like, this is all it took to convince you? Like, there's nothing persuasive in here at all. And it leaves you feeling bewildered. Why do you find this so persuasive when I don't? We're both looking at the same stuff, and you find something that's incredibly compelling, and I find something incredibly hollow. And the truth is, this is not just in matters of faith. We see this in modern politics all the time, right? I will read the same article, and my friend will read the same article, and I'm persuaded and he's not, or I'm not persuaded and he is. I have family members who look at the same data and as I do, and they'll come to a polar opposite conclusion on a host of issues like vaccines or which political candidate is the most persuasive or whether global warming is a real threat or not. So this is across the board on moral issues, political issues, scientific issues. What we find is that people can look at the same data, the same arguments, but somehow arrive at entirely different conclusions about the merits of those arguments, the persuasiveness of those arguments.
It's the same information. Like literally, it's the same information. It's the same facts. And then for one person, it's like, that's crazy. It's like ridiculous. The other person, they're saying, was what I'm hearing you explain. Right?
Yeah.
Well, this could be political. This could be spiritual. This could be religious, right?
Yeah.
What is it that would cause someone to be convinced while another person wouldn't be convinced, you know?
All of us want to think that when we're persuaded, it's entirely due to the merits of the argument. It's entirely due to the strength of the evidence. But the truth is, it's not. There are non-rational factors at play in any moment of persuasion. And I want to be clear here. This is whether you're being persuaded out of faith or into faith. There are non-rational factors at play. And I want to dwell on this for a moment.
Okay.
We all know this to be true. I'll sometimes ask students, who here served the mission? And most of the hands will raise. And I'll say, do you guys remember the point in the NTC where you were trained on how to engage in rational argumentation in favor of the historicity of the Book of Mormon?
Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah. Wait. Nobody's, they're like, no. Yeah. You're basically saying, do you remember when they taught you to argue about it? Yeah, they didn't teach you yet. Okay.
They didn't teach that because we're trained not to, actually. Because we know that when somebody is persuaded of the truthfulness of the Book of Mormon, it is not ever on the rational merits. It's not ever on the strength of the argument, or strength of the evidence. Nor do we want it to be even. So my point here is that as individuals of faith, as Latter-day Saints, we all know that the deepest conversions, the deepest persuasion is not on the rational level, nor do we even want it to be on the rational level.
Well, how do we get there? That's what I'm confused about. Is like, how do we even get there in the first place? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, when we are trying to persuade somebody to give faith a chance, right? What do? We invite them to read the Book of Mormon. We invite them to church. We invite them to pray. What we're doing is, and all three of those things are working on they're working beneath the level of our rationality, right? We are attempting to speak to the elephant rather than the rider, to borrow from Jonathan Haidt's terms. Okay. Yeah.
I read that book, right?
Yeah.
Can you explain what that is?
So in the book, The Righteous Mind, Jonathan Haidt talks about how persuasion is often non-rational, and he makes this very point. He says that we are the strength of an argument or how strong an argument appears to us will often depend on more on our gut than our mind. He calls this the rider versus the elephant, right?
Okay.
The rider is our mind. The elephant, the rider is like the person riding the elephant is our mind. The elephant is our intuitions, how we feel towards something. Right?
So it'd be kind of like from a scriptural perspective, it'd be like the mind and the heart. Right?
Yes.
The desires versus like the logic.
They're both important, and nobody would deny they're important.
Yeah.
But when it comes to persuasion, we often undersell the importance of the heart. We undersell the importance of our intuitions, our gut reactions.
Well, because in real life, our 5 senses, right? Like we have one mind, but we have 5 senses.
Well, more than that, but yeah.
Well, I mean, more senses, but I'm just saying like everything affects us, right? Like the temperature of the room, that's playing a role into the way I am right now. But the logical side is really, there's a lot of parts involved.
Well, the truth, everybody knows this.
Yeah.
It's just that we don't often talk about it. We're not as open as I think we don't consciously talk about this the way I think I thought we should. Advertisers know this. If you're going to convince someone to buy a car, you're not going. I mean, sure, they'll give you stats and figures and safety ratings and miles per gallon, but those aren't what ever persuade people. Not really. Advertisers know that if you want to sell your car, what do you got to do? You got to show Matthew McConaughey smiling confidently as he drives your car, because they know that in order to get you to buy the car, they had to speak to the elephant, not the rider. They had to make you feel warmly towards this car, to make you see this car as the thing that classy people buy, that classy people drive, right?
There's way more at play is what I'm understanding you're saying.
Yeah, right? And so, and advertisers know that you got to speak to the intuitions. You got to change how people feel towards your product, not just how they think about it. You can think well about something, but if you feel coldly towards it, you're not going to buy it.
That's the part that you're saying. So the rider and the elephant, you're just saying there's different parts at play, not just the rider, right? It's like
it's not just the mind.
It's not just the logic, but there's also the other part that we fail to neglect a lot.
Yeah.
And so it's not just facts.
Well, here's an example. Sometimes in the classroom, I'll tell people the story about how last Wednesday I woke up, I wanted to make myself a smoothie for breakfast, and I started digging around the freezer, and I realized that I was completely out of frozen pineapple and peaches and whatever berries that I normally put in my smoothie. So not all is lost, because I opened the fridge and I found some leftover pizza, and I put it in the blender and made myself a delicious pizza smoothie.
That's gross.
There you go. What was happening in your gut right there?
Yeah. I mean,
did you have a moment of disgust right there?
Yeah. What are we doing? What are we doing here? Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. and I'll tell students, okay, I have some really strong rational arguments here, some really persuasive arguments, backed up by evidence and strong logic that this is perfectly fine. After all, pizza smoothie is what goes down your throat every time you eat pizza.
After you chew it, right?
Yeah.
I'm like thinking about like a pizza blended up.
Yeah.
Like you put all the
and I'll throw rational arguments.
Blend it up.
Yeah,
it doesn't sound good.
But that's what you're doing in your mouth after all, right?
Yeah.
Right? But the point is, I'll throw rational argument after rational argument at these students, and they're strong arguments. They can't refute them. They're like, okay, yeah, you're right, but gross. And this is what Jonathan Haidt calls moral dumbfounding. Like what he uses to describe the condition where we run out of rational arguments. And all we have to rely on is it's just gross. It's just wrong. I don't like it. I can't explain why. I can't articulate my reasons. I just don't like it. And so I'm not going to eat it. I'm not going to drink it. I mean, this is my kids every time at dinner, right? I could throw all rational arguments at them they want for why that meal is a delicious meal, and they'll be like, it doesn't pass the sniff test.
So you're calling it moral.
So I'm not calling it, Jonathan Haidt calls it moral dumbfounding.
Okay.
And it's basically when you're back to the wall and you're completely out of rational arguments, but you stick to your guns anyways. And his point is that rational argument almost, not never, but not very often persuades people. What you're going to do in order to persuade people, you have to change how they feel. You have to change their gut. You have to change their intuitions. So if I wanted to persuade you to enjoy pizza smoothies, what do I got to do? Got to show Matthew McConaughey enjoying his smoothie.
So
you know?
So let's break down this idea of what moral intuition is then.
Yeah.
to give me a better idea and like why? Because I'm thinking like why in the world is it that Matthew McConaughey? Like what is like as it plays into the idea of moral intuition? Because I'm understanding you say that there's more to it than just the logic, right? But obviously there's something more to it that we kind of stick to our guns. What is our guns? What is that moral intuition? How would you describe what that is?
It's more of our affective reaction, right?
Okay.
It's more, if we first, when Jonathan and I talked about moral intuition, the term I actually like for it most is our moral taste buds.
Okay.
Right? We have things that we enjoy, foods you like, that they're not based on any rational reasons, just things that you think taste good. And things that you think taste good, I might think taste bad, and vice versa. That's not rational. It's not. We all know it's not a rational process.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of taste. And we can talk in a moment about where those tastes come from, but we form these tastes, whether through upbringing, culture, media, advertising, to some degree, perhaps even genetics, right? We all have these various varying tastes. Preference. Our political tribes, they all play a role, and we can talk more about this. But the truth is, once we have these tastes, those tastes then change the threshold of persuasion.
What do you mean?
When something tastes good to us, we ask a different question than when something tastes bad. The way Jonathan Haidt puts it, and I really like the way he puts it, he says, when something tastes right to us, when it tastes good to us, we ask, can I believe?
So there's a good way to...
Can I believe? We're looking for permission to believe. And all it takes is almost any rational argument will do. You encounter a rational argument, and it's because it tastes good, because the conclusion tastes good, the rational argument seems strong. But when the conclusion tastes bad, when the claims being made taste iffy, doesn't pass the sniff test for you, then the question we ask is, must I believe? Then we're not questing for permission to believe. We're questing for an escape hatch. And almost any rational argument to the contrary will serve.
So there's usually like a baseline, is what I'm understanding you say. I'm curious to know like where does that even come from? So like if I have this taste, where's the origin of the taste? Because I'm assuming that they can change, because there's sometimes where there's people where even your taste buds change, right?
Yeah.
Some people will like a certain thing. If we're using that metaphor, right? This metaphor of taste buds, what is the origin of, if we're talking moral intuition, it's kind of like that thing that we kind of just, it is like a moral taste buds.
Yeah.
How do we form them? You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's a great question. Again, like there's a number of different factors that play into our moral tastes. We'll call them our moral tastes. And I want to clarify here, when I talk about moral tastes, so lying, stealing, extramarital sexual activity, whatever moral activity we're looking at, do we scrunch up our nose and say, that doesn't look right, that doesn't seem right? Or do we like, hey, whatever floats your boat, right? We're talking about what your gut does whenever you are encountering moral activities. And how do we form those? Well, Jonathan Haidt makes a good case that some of this might actually be a matter of disposition, right? Our moral foundations theory, and some people seem to be born with an openness to new experience that others aren't. But I would say the lion's share, and I think you would agree, the lion's share of this has to do with upbringing and culture. So we absorb the moral taste buds of our culture, for example.
So there's an influence from, just how we grow, just the surroundings or the values. Is that what you're saying? Yeah,
absolutely. So our culture, what
we shape it.
Yeah, and it's not even through direct instruction, right? It's just through encounters, what we encounter in our culture, exposure. Our political tribes can do have a great deal of influence on our moral taste buds. Our entertainment, our media, I think, has a great deal of influence. But I think exposure is the biggest thing, right? The quickest way to learn to enjoy a new food is to eat it a lot. Yeah. If you don't like it, force yourself to eat it. And you eat it 10, 15 times, and
you'll start to like it.
You'll start to like it, or at least find it tolerable.
Interesting.
And so true. Yeah. And so when it comes to our moral taste buds, it's the same thing, right? Things that we rarely encounter in our society that are socially taboo and rarely encountered, we'll be like, yuck, that doesn't taste right. But things that we see everywhere, we'll start to develop a tolerance for. So just as a matter of natural course,
So going back to the milkshake, or the smoothie. I mean, it could be to a point where like if that was the only thing that was available, and
if all your friends were drinking it,
yeah, peer pressure makes a big difference.
if all your friends are drinking it, if it's on the menu of every restaurant,
You're more willing to.
well, and it's just eventually, even if you don't ever enjoy the milkshake, you're going to be like, whatever. You're just not going to feel that disgust anymore. You're not going to say, ew, gross anymore, because it's just everywhere, and you're just going to be like, whatever. And then once you get to that point, then the arguments that I give, hey, it's what you drink anyways when you eat a pizza, those are going to sound, oh yeah, that's pretty persuasive. Whether or not you ever drink it yourself, you're going to be more persuaded by those arguments because you're not going to have that ick factor anymore.
So there's definitely, I mean, this makes me think of desensitization, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what this is.
But even before you could be desensitized, you're saying that when you grow up, like for example, politically, most people are politically the same belief or the same party as their parents. A lot of times, not always the case, but I think that some people might say, well, they might use this type of perspective when they say, well, I didn't grow up in the church. I mean, I grew up in the church. Yeah. How do I know that I would even believe that if, let's say I didn't grow up in the church, maybe I wouldn't even accept most of these truths. Maybe I wouldn't accept most of these core beliefs, right?
Right. And the point there, and there is truth to this, and some will use this as an attempt to undermine faith, right? They'll say, hey, you only believe this because you were exposed to this for many years. It only looks good to you because you've been desensitized to the weirdness of it all, right? They'll use this as a way of trying to undermine faith. But the truth is it cuts both ways. It cuts both ways. What you see as good and normal and right and true in the world often depends on what you encounter the most often. What you're surrounded by the most. And so, yeah, of course, if you grow up in the church, hearing truth claims about the Book of Mormon, hearing about the church teachings on gender and family, hearing about prophets and apostles, none of this is going to seem weird and strange to you. And arguments in favor of these teachings are going to just seem stronger to you than they will to somebody who is encountering them for the first time.
I think culture is very similar to that, right? When I went to Brazil, when I lived there, I mean, there's things that people do that you're like, wait, what? Like, it's just different. It's like you're not familiar with it. But there, like, they don't even think twice about it.
Yeah.
It's never even the same thing. You could have, there's like hand gestures that people make, and I'm not trying to be, disrespectful, but I mean, even the simple things, like this here means this, over there means completely something different, not even anything that's bad. It just means something. Even language, like a word that's a cuss word, if somebody says a cuss word, it's like, if you hear it all the time, it kind of loses its meaning.
Well, there was a point in time in my life, not that long ago, when I'm watching a show and they start dropping F words and whatnot, and I would wince. I'd be like, oh, this is uncomfortable. This doesn't taste right to me, and because of my own media choices, now it happens, and I don't even realize it's happening. I don't even notice, and it doesn't, it doesn't register with me anymore. And it's that desensitization process. It changes how things taste to us.
Well, isn't there also, have you ever, homeostasis, right? Your body, your brain, from what I understand of homeostasis, it just wants to be comfortable, right? It's the reason why it's like the temperature in the room, right? It kind of fluctuates, it recalibrates so that it can stay at a comfortable place, right?
Yeah.
Would you say how would you, is there like a physical aspect to it?
I don't know that I know enough to speak to the physiology of it all, but I can definitely speak to like the cognitive factor. I mean, there is a like frequent exposure. I actually, no, never mind. I am comfortable enough to say that frequent exposure will change your physiological reaction to something.
Maybe not me. Well, so I guess maybe like distinguishing between physiological or cognitive. I'm just saying there's like an actual, like your brain is doing something, right? Novelty, like you hear a song the first time, you're like, man, I can't believe they're saying that, right? And then your brain wants to be comfortable, right? So it kind of just ignores it. That's more of what I'm trying to get at.
Well, I mean, I'm going to take a step back and I'll say that one of the most effective therapeutic practices that we have is exposure therapy. To treat anxiety and phobias and irrational fears is to expose them to that which they're afraid of. The more they're exposed to it, the less their body will react negatively to it.
So let's go.
And going back to what we were saying before, the less your body reacts negatively to it, the more persuasive you're going to find arguments in favor of that thing. And the point that and the reason why I think this is significant is because, let's say I grew up as a member of the church, and I almost never see anyone smoking because I am growing up in a small town in Utah where nobody smokes. And the first time I see someone smoke, I'm going to go, yuck. And arguments in favor of the word of wisdom are going to seem very strong to me. But if I am around people who smoke or drink coffee or drink alcohol socially all the time, to the point where my gut doesn't react at all to this, then arguments against the word of wisdom, arguments that maybe social drinking isn't all that bad, they're going to seem more persuasive to me. And it's not because the merits of the argument are different. It's because my gut is responding differently. When my gut already says this tastes bad, arguments against that thing seem strong. When my gut says, this seems fine, arguments against that thing seem flimsy. And the Jonathan Haidt's point is that the gut leads the way more than we realize. He calls it the intuitionist dog that wags the rationalist tail, or our moral taste buds kind of guide, put our mind on a leash and lead our mind around a little bit.
So this to the natural. I think the biggest thing that I'm understanding and I'm learning from what you're saying is that one of the biggest misconceptions is that just the logical argument itself is the thing that I'm going to persuade you, you're going to persuade me, and then we go back and forth and it never works. But this element of moral intuition and moral taste buds is way bigger at play than we realize.
Yes. Have you ever gotten into an argument online and walked away having changed someone's mind?
That doesn't ever work. I can't think. I think that usually agreeing or affirming to a degree.
Yeah.
It's almost like it knocks down their, it's not even intentional. It's just hey, maybe there's some truth to that. Let's see.
Disarm them by taking them out of defensive mode a little bit. Right? Yeah.
But I mean, never. I think this. No, I've never ever.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter how strong your arguments are. You can have the strongest arguments in the world, and you're not going to change their mind. What's going to change their mind is meeting lots of people who think like you, regular exposure to people who think like you, developing a friends group of people who think like you, so that way the people who think like you don't seem so wrong and icky anymore. And then eventually they'll be like, maybe those arguments are actually stronger than I thought they were. But it's not a conscious process. It's not a deliberate process. It's just that one day they'll wake up and say, those arguments, I'm persuaded.
That's interesting. I just think that obviously doesn't happen, right? So why do we keep on acting like it does? You know what I mean? This happens all the time. I'm saying you come home for family dinner. I know that there's so many cases of people where somebody has decided to not practice their religion anymore, but it being a part of the family, right? It's a big and then people stop coming, right? I think that's a big experience that people have. But we still insist, hey, well, let me show you this. A lot of times it's almost hey, let me show you this article.
Read this article, see if that convinces you.
Read this, watch this video, look at this thing, right?
Yeah. And I think what we're often doing is we're misdiagnosing the problem. Oh, the problem is that you're under the sway of these fallacious rational arguments. So if I can show you these arguments are fallacious, if I can show you that your evidence is not as sound as you think, then I can convince you, right? But that's misdiagnosing the problem to begin with. Right. I want to go back to the.
So that's the main point is that we're just misdiagnosing and we're making the assumption that that's the thing and it's not the thing and it's never going to really change anything.
Throwing more articles at people isn't going to change their mind, right? But I want to go back. I want to demonstrate here that we all already know this to be true on an intuitive level, right?
Yeah.
Again, going back to the missionary thing, we all know that people don't convert to the church when you throw. Forgive me here for this context. When you throw a bunch of Book of Mormon Central articles at them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those articles are useful. They're important. They're I think that they serve a vital importance, right? But I think it's typically more after the fact than before the fact, right? Really, if you want to persuade someone, you got to get them reading the Book of Mormon. You got to get them exposed to it.
It's exposure.
Yeah. You got to get into church, exposed to people who are Latter-day Saints, exposed to the practices of Latter-day Saints. Then you get them on their knees to pray, talk to God. And what are we doing when we pray and talk to God? But essentially asking God to change how we feel.
But what I think that, in my experience, I think that a lot of people consider that just to be fluffy, right?
It's not.
And I mean,
yeah.
but I like Grant Hardy's perspective of the Book of Mormon itself, right? I think that even the title page of the Book of Mormon explains how it should be read.
Yeah.
And it never says, I'm going to prove to you all the evidence. It says, I'm going to show, what does he say? An abridgment taken from the Book of Ether also, he says, when they're building, okay, let me see, to show unto the remnant of the house of Israel what great things the Lord has done to their fathers, that they may know the covenants of the Lord, that they are not cast off, and to the convincing of the Jew and Gentile that Jesus is the Christ, the eternal God. Almost like we want to give you an experience with him through this book, manifesting himself to all nations. And if there are any faults, they be the mistakes of men, wherefore condemn not the things of God, that they may be found spotless at the judgment seat of Christ. Basically, this is not a book that's trying to, like even Nephi at the very beginning is like, I'm going to show you from my own personal experience the tender mercies of God.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to prove to you.
It's not a book of, it's not a list of evidences. It's a series of stories. Stories work on the level of our gut. They work on our level of our moral taste buds. You want to change someone's moral taste buds? Tell them stories. Stories involving people, right? With real world experiences, with meaningful consequences. That's how you change how people feel. And what I'll tell people, what I'll often tell students is, there is no prayer that God, I think, is more willing and ready to answer than a prayer that goes something like this: Heavenly Father, please help things that are true to taste sweet to me. Please help things that are wrong and of the adversary to taste bitter to me. Help things that are of God to taste good to me. Help me calibrate my moral taste buds so that right tastes right and wrong tastes wrong. And that right there, I think, is one of the most powerful prayers that we can pray. Because I prayed that prayer before, and sure enough, like I go back to my ordinary media, and suddenly things that I would just brush aside start seeming a little bit offensive. Whoa, right? Like things that I know in my mind are wrong start to feel wrong down here.
So
So
let's break apart this idea of what morality really is, because I feel like you're getting back into that. It's like when that moral compass changes, it does feel different, right? Is what I'm understanding. So how would you define morality in general and what that actually is? Because I think most people would agree it's not good to kill people, right?
Right.
That's like, I would say that we would all come to that same conclusion.
We all have this consensus, right? That murder is wrong. Now, I will say this: that I actually believe I call myself an acolyte of Terry Warner. I believe we all have a moral sense, a basic sensibility of how we ought to treat others. And it's when we ignore that moral sense that we start developing layers of self-justification and rationalization to justify our cruelty towards others. But that's a different story. But what I will say, though, is that
in what way, though? Because I think that it'd be important to understand the perspective of where that it's coming from, right?
Yeah. So Terry Warner argues that we all have a basic sense that to treat others with dignity and respect. And this manifests in various day-to-day occurrences, like, when you see someone rushing to the elevator and you stop the elevator to let them in, to smile and say thank you to the cashier, to be a little bit more patient with your child. These are all like just a basic sense that we ought to do right by those around us. And when we ignore that basic sense, in Terry Warner's theory, we purchase a need to justify ourselves. And that's when we start to rationalize our actions, engage in self-justification. I think my point here, though, is that there are cultures in the world, going back to what you were saying, where I'm going to back up. There are moments in time, very least, where bloodshed becomes rampant, and people start to delight in bloodshed, and it loses that sense of wrongness. And I think we can desensitize ourselves. So I say, even on something as serious as murder, we can desensitize ourselves.
Yeah.
If we're embedded in a culture or a historical moment where it's normal and accepted, then we start to make excuses for it. We start to arguments in favor of it start to ring more strong. And my point there is that we have to safeguard not just the mind, but the heart. We have to safeguard our moral intuition, our moral compass. And another way to put this is that we have to educate our conscience.
What do you mean?
If we don't proactively educate our conscience and calibrate our internal compass against divine sources, we will inevitably be educated by just our broader culture.
So I this the perspective of me is act or be acted upon, right? Like that underlying understanding of agency.
Left to our own devices, or left to its own devices, our culture will simply will educate our conscience according to the precepts of our broader culture.
It's almost like a default.
It's a default. And if we're not careful to guard our conscience and to proactively educate it against divine sources like the scriptures, through prayer, by the teachings of modern prophets, through regular temple attendance, allowing those things to calibrate our sense of what is right and what is wrong, what is sweet and what is bitter, then we're going to default to our broader culture. And this gets back to what we were talking about earlier. If we live in a culture right now where believing in translation of ancient records seems kind of weird and silly. We live in a culture where teachings on gender and marriage and sexuality and family seems backwards and bigoted and embarrassing, right?
And it's evolved.
It's evolved over time. And if we're not proactively calibrating our conscience against the teachings of modern prophets and against the teaching of Scripture, we're going to absorb the cultural tastes of our broader culture. And I think this is one problem that many Latter-day Saints have been caught up in unawares. They have started to absorb the tastes of their broader culture. So things like, I'm going to use an example here, like modern cultural trends on sexuality and marriage start to lose their bitterness. They start to seem normal and fine because they're exposed to them so often in the media and their entertainment and their politics and their local celebrations and pride parades and all this kind of stuff. And to the point where they start to say, well, the rational arguments against these behaviors and lifestyles just don't seem all that strong anymore to me. And the church's teachings on these matters are starting to seem a little bit, they no longer pass the sniff test to me anymore. And so then—
And it's very gradual.
It's very gradual. And so suddenly they find themselves in a position where maintaining conviction in these teachings of the church, it starts to place them in a position where they're like, that's a little bit embarrassing.
I mean, you mean did they change the perspective and now it's like, oh, I'm weird if I don't.
Yeah, I'm weird if I don't do that. And,
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and furthermore, then they'll say, okay, so what are the arguments in favor of the church's teachings? And they could find those arguments, but they'll read them and they'll be like, I'm not persuaded by that. And then they'll read arguments against the church's teachings on those same matters. And they'll be like, wow, that's very persuasive. And they'll believe that they were persuaded on the merits of the arguments.
When really this is what's changing.
Yeah. When in reality their taste had changed. And they started asking a new question. Instead of, can I believe in what the church teaches? It's must I believe in what the church teaches?
Because then I got to alter this other stuff too.
Yeah. And furthermore, like the truth is, no rational argument will ever compel you. So the moment you start asking, must I believe? The answer is always no. You don't ever have to believe. There's always arguments on the other side, you know? And so the current model for faith crises right now, and this is the prevailing model right now, and I see this everywhere, is what we call the accumulation model, where people have a conviction, but every faith system is going to have unanswered questions, lingering doubts, counter arguments, and when people encounter those, they're like, well, I still believe, I'm going to put this question on the shelf. And in the accumulation model, those questions build and they build and they build until eventually the shelf breaks from the weight of all these questions. That's the accumulation model for a faith crisis. And basically what this does is this places the fault of the faith crisis, essentially the responsibility for the faith crisis, on all this mountain of counter evidence and doubts and unanswered questions. But what I think is missing in this conversation is the strength of the shelf. Right? And I think the shelf is actually our moral intuitions, our moral taste buds. If your moral taste, if things that are if the teachings of the church taste good to you, if you look at President Nelson and you see him as wow, that man is an extraordinary man. He seems like just such a good person to me. If you look at the Book of Mormon and you say, wow, this is an extraordinary book. It tastes right to me. It tastes good. If you read the Proclamation in the Family and you're like, this tastes sweet, then your shelf is going to withstand a mountain of unanswered questions.
And it's something that you have to build.
Yeah. But if you look at if you're reading the Book of Mormon, you're like, this is kind of weird. And if you look at President Nelson and you're like, he seems kind of old. And if you read the Proclamation on the Family and you're like, this is kind of embarrassing, then guess what? It might only take a couple unanswered questions on your shelf to break it.
Yeah.
It's the shelf is your taste buds. It's your intuitions. It's the heart. That's the shelf.
As you're saying this, it really makes me think of 2 Nephi chapter 28. 2 Nephi 28, just how the adversary works, right? Just how, behold, that day he'll rage in the hearts. He focuses on the heart.
Yeah.
And the thing about deception is you don't know what's happening, right? Unless if you did, it wouldn't be deception, right? And he says, rage in the hearts of the children of men and stir them up to anger, again, a feeling against that which is good. And others will he pacify and lull them away into carnal security, that they will say, all is well in Zion. Zion prospereth, all is well. The devil cheateth their souls and leadeth them away carefully down to hell, right? Mm-hmm. But then on the opposite end, like God, he says in verse 30, behold, saith the Lord, I will give unto the children of men. And I feel like this is the shelf, right? Line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little, there a little. And blessed are those who hearken to my precepts. They act on my precepts.
Yes.
And lend their ear to my counsel. And they shall, where did I lose my spot? And lend an ear to my counsel, for they shall learn wisdom. For unto him that receiveth will I give more. It's kind of like, it goes both directions the same way. And I feel like that default, it just makes me think of the default, right?
If you default to your broader culture, then you're going to find yourself more of the culture than you are of the kingdom.
Well, if you don't even try, if you're not even doing anything, you're still doing something, right? No answer, no decision is still a decision, right? Read that verse. What was the verse you were saying? Tell me about.
The verse I was thinking of is 2 Nephi chapter 4, and this is in Nephi's psalm. And it's 2 Nephi chapter 4, verse 31, and it says, O Lord, wilt thou redeem my soul? Wilt thou deliver me out of the hands of mine enemies? Wilt thou make me that I may shake at the appearance of sin?
That's what you're saying is the prayer that you have prayed.
Yeah. Wilt thou make me that I may shake at the appearance of sin? I believe that what it means to be in the world but not of the world means to interface with the world, to live in the world, to participate in its institutions, to engage in its media even at times in a selective and thoughtful way, right? But to not share the tastes of the world. To learn how to safeguard our moral intuitions and our moral tastes so that when we see sin in the world, even if we're being kind and loving and compassionate, it still tastes bitter to us. And this is a very unpopular concept in this day and age. It's very unpopular to say that for example, when I see somebody engaging in, say, extramarital sexual activity, that I should, if my moral taste buds are calibrated right, according to divine sources, say, that doesn't taste right. That doesn't taste good. And not in a judgy way, not in a way that,
Like, I don't want that.
Yeah, I don't want that. I don't think that's right. I don't even think he should be doing it either. I'm not going to mistreat him. I'm not going to be confrontational or unkind. But man, I hear stories, for example, of roommates, right? Latter-day Saint roommates, where one roommate will go off and cross the boundaries and get high fives from his roommates. And the response is, well, we got to be loving after all. Yeah. We can't be judgy. Yeah. Well, no, at the very least, if sin tastes wrong to us, we're not going to be high-fiving people for engaging in sin.
But again, it's that desensitization that naturally happens because of...
If you're exposed to it all the time, if you're not safeguarding your intuitions, it's going to be very easy to start to feel as the world feels, right? To watch characters on the screen, for example, in your favorite TV shows, engaging in behaviors that appear to be immoral, but down here you're like, oh yes, This is exciting. You know?
Even back to the idea of what is morality, right?
Yeah.
I think that a lot of, you hear the term moral relativism,
Yeah.
right? And I think that it's founded under really understanding, well, what is actually true? I know that it was Elder Christofferson. He gave a talk to a lot of the people in the church education system, right? And he's like, look, we really need to safeguard what we believe is true. And even when you think of defending the faith, I think that a lot of defending the faith is defending the trust and faith that you have in you. And I think a lot of times we look at like, well, we want to defend what people say about the church. We do want to clarify, right?
Yeah.
But when Paul's talking about it, right, I think he's really referring to, we want to defend.
Protecting how you feel.
Protecting what is actually true, because it can have a tendency, if not guarded, to be attacked and just dissolved.
Even if your head is still in the game, even if you are still rationally persuaded by the arguments in favor of the Book of Mormon and church teachings, if you feel indistinguishably from your peers who are critics, then it's only a matter of time before their arguments start to win, I think. I think when it comes to defending the faith, it has to be both. We can defend it rationally, but we also have to defend our intuitions. And part of that involves, I think, being a little bit selective about what we're exposed to, not putting ourselves in sort of this insular bubble, right? I think we need to integrate with the world. We still need to be in the world. But you know what? Maybe I don't have to be entertained by the same thing my friends are.
And it's not easy to do this.
Right.
Because it is, like what we hear, I mean, that's what the scriptures teach us, that in the last days, people will call good evil and evil good.
Yeah.
Right? People will, and I think that we crave so much for connection, then that's why I think peer pressure is so powerful.
Right.
Right? But what about this question of, like what is true? Because I think that if, in order for us to really have this baseline, well, actually, let me back up. I think even before that, I think we should consider, like, when it comes to morality, morality has to do with us. It's like, it's not just, and I feel like this is one of the biggest lies that Satan says, right?
Yeah.
It's that, well, it's not affecting me. But I think that when it comes to morality really is a question of how it affects the whole society, right? Like, don't kill, don't lie. I mean, it's like, how does lying affect the society? How does killing affect the society? It's us, not me.
So let's use this example, right? How is it affecting me? Like, let's say I'm spending an hour a day or two a day watching media or shows that depict rampantly immoral behavior. I'm not talking pornography. I'm talking like just your average Netflix show.
Yeah.
Right. So, well, I'm still going to church. I'm still reading my scriptures. I'm still being kind to people, paying my tithing. It's not affecting me. Well, but if later on when I encounter immorality, my intuitions have changed, my moral tastes have changed, where I no longer feel any sort of unease at the thought of the sin, where I'm looking at where my loved ones engage in more behavior, and I'm like, hey, whatever, right? And rather than, I'm not comfortable with that, right? It is affecting me. It's affecting me on a much deeper level than my outward behaviors, right? It's the shelf itself might be, I think, rotting a little bit underneath if my intuitions are being shifted to align with those of the world.
So would you say that, to me, I'm understanding, and maybe I'm just trying to get the grasp of this, is the shelf is kind of your own personal conversion, right?
Yeah.
Would you say?
Yeah. Well, it's...
Or is that what you mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I maybe be so bold, I might say that conversion up here is usually only after the fact, and even if it's before the fact, it's only the first step. Conversion of the heart, changing the heart, and what I mean by this is changing how we feel towards sin. That's the genuine conversion. I think real conversion happens when you look upon sin and you say, "Ugh, that's not right." That's when you know you've been truly converted to righteousness. Now, of course, there's counterfeits of this, right? There's a self-righteous disgust with sin, right? Where you're yucky because you sin. I'm not going to be friends with you because you sin. That's not what I'm talking about, right? What I'm talking about is sin itself.
The calibration. I think you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, because I think that's the difference between shame and guilt. I think guilt, like, if I pull my finger back, after a while, my fingers it's going to warn me. I'm going to feel it. And after a while, it's either going to go numb or it's going to fall off, right? But I feel like shame is the same perspective to me. At first, we confuse those two sometimes in that process of us feeling that internally, right? It's like some people will do something wrong and they'll think, I am bad, or when the thing is actually bad. And really, I think the difference between shame and guilt is the focus, either focus on us or focus on Christ.
Is
right?
the focus on on me being a bad person versus the thing I'm doing being a bad thing, right?
Yeah, and it goes both ways.
I mean, people. It's really unpopular these days. There's a really unpopular adage now: love the sinner, hate the sin, right? But it expresses this core truth that we can love people and still detest sin. And this is also something that I think everybody intuitively knows to be true. I sometimes ask students, okay, so let's say you find out a friend, your roommate is looking at, let's say, pornography, and you say to him, I don't think you should be doing that. Are you being overly judgmental? And I actually I have students say, yeah, it's not your business. It's the bishop's business only. I have a lot of students who will say that, right? And then I'll change the scenario. Okay, let's say
what do you mean is the bishop's?
It's the popular thing today. It's the idea that the bishop is the only one in your local congregation who can ever decry sin. That's kind of the popular notion these days.
Is that true?
No, it's not. But but I'll change the scenario and say, okay, so let's say your roommate made a racist joke, and you say, hey, I don't think we should be doing that. Are you being overly judgmental? And no one's hands goes up. No one's hands goes up. Because we all know that it's perfectly okay to turn your nose up at sin. It's just that some sins are less culturally unpopular than others. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It's just normalized.
Yeah.
Right? But it's almost on the cultural level, it's been accepted. It's become a social norm, even though people know it's wrong.
Right.
And I think that's kind of what you've been saying.
Right, exactly. And I think we know that it's not actually overly judgmental to turn your nose up at sin when it's a sin that we all recognize to be sin. Like racism, for example. You can't be too judgmental about racism because racism is wrong. It's not okay. And I don't think anybody really thinks it's inappropriate to call it out. Like, hey, that's not okay. We shouldn't be doing that, right? So the question then is, why is it that we're so wary of doing so when it comes to other sins like sexual sin or Sabbath breaking? Now, again, there is, I think, the history of sometimes becoming overly judgmental, like, oh, I saw someone going to Walmart on the Sabbath, right? And we turn our nose up down at people who are sinning. But I actually think it's kind of healthy to where the thought of going to Walmart on a Sunday just to buy hot dogs seems uncomfortable to you. It's a healthy thing to think that Sabbath keeping is important enough that breaking the Sabbath makes you itch a little bit. It's like that where on the level of your gut, you're like, that doesn't taste right to me. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that the desire part though is really a big part of what you're saying because, again, if you're just, because to me when it comes to the Sabbath day especially, it's like, it's one perspective of saying, what can't I do?
Yeah, it's not it's not a list of do's and don'ts by any means.
But I'm saying again, the back to that perspective, because when it comes to the commandments in general, when I was a kid, I used to think that the commandments were like these rules. But now the older I get, the more experience I have with God, it's like, no, I mean, come on, don't lie. It's like the world would be better if no one lied. Can you imagine? I was talking to my kids about this the other day. I was like, look, like the Sabbath day is a way for us to cleanse ourselves from the perspective of the world.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, how can I like intentionally do that? Not just avoid.
And
right?
Yeah. And the Sabbath one is difficult only because, different people have different ways of observing the Sabbath, and we should respect that. And I don't think we should be going and evaluating other people's Sabbath worship. My point there is just simply that on a whole array of issues, whether it's word of wisdom, Sabbath observance, or the law of chastity, or honesty, or racism, or respect and dignity, and a whole host of things, right? The truth is, sin should taste bad.
I see what you're saying.
That's the point.
Yep.
Sin should taste bad. And if we're calibrating ourselves against sacred sources, sin will taste bad. And I don't think it's inherently judgmental to have that reaction to sin.
And to your point, I think that every person, I think this is really true. And maybe I'm wrong, and I could be wrong. I know that I can only speak from my own personal experience.
Yeah.
In small ways and in big ways, I know that that's the case for me in my life. Where, even whenever you're a kid, do you remember the first time you did something, and it wasn't even where your mom's gonna get mad at you or not. You can remember times where you're like, that just doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
It just doesn't feel right.
It doesn't seem right. And again, the point here is that.
But there's always that time. I'm saying.
Yeah, everyone has that moment.
And then the more you do it, it just feels. I'm just telling you, this is the case for most things. And I think maybe there is a homeostasis part of this too. Right? It was just like, it just your brain can't handle the pain, and so it'll readjust, and then it'll readjust, so that it can maintain it.
Yeah, exactly. And so the argument that I want to the core argument here is there's 2 or 3 things here at play, right? But the first one is everybody knows that wrong things tasting wrong doesn't mean you're not loving, right? I could love my friend and say, hey, let's not make those sort of jokes anymore. It's just not right, and you know it, and I know it. And I love you, man. It's just not okay. And nobody's going to second guess my love for that, right? But then if I find out that my friend has been breaking the law of chastity, and I say, hey, I don't think that's okay, and I think you know that's not okay, and I hope better for you because you know I love you, right? I feel like today we're all like, whoa, you got to be loving now, right? But we all know that that's not inherently unloving to say. But the difference is when our moral intuitions have been calibrated for our broader culture, it becomes uncomfortable to call out sin. But if our moral intuitions are calibrated to divine sources, it becomes more comfortable to recognize sin for what it is.
I think the motif of Tastebuds and I mean, homeostasis is kind of like a more like
I like that one.
It's like, oh man, the natural man is an enemy to God, and always has been, and always will be forever and ever, unless he yieldeth to the enticings of the Holy Spirit and putteth off the natural man and becometh a saint. Right?
Yeah.
It's like you have to, and it's what humility does. But I'm saying we can't deny the fact that there's a calibration always going on, right? And it's almost like, well, hold on a second. We're talking about these arguments that are logical. Yeah. But it's hard to and when you go over to morality, I think that
we're dealing with something more than what's up here.
Oh yeah. It's like, well, what is the more immoral thing that we're trying to justify? Yeah. That would cause us to even want to recalibrate. Yes. Does that make sense what I'm asking?
No, what you're talking about here is going back to both Terry Warner and the age-old concept of cognitive dissonance, right?
But I'm saying people would argue, well, you have cognitive dissonance because obviously you just believe it because you've always believed it and you want to keep believing it, right? Yeah. But I'm saying, because we say faith crisis, right? What is the thing that's being deconstructed? Mm-hmm. Because there's something that's there that is not whole like it used to be. Yes. And you're tying that to morality.
I'm tying it to the heart. It's a big part of the picture that I think is being neglected in our broader discourse, right? If you're in the midst of a faith crisis, if you're wondering if the Book of Mormon is really true, if you're having doubts about Joseph Smith and you're feeling unsteady in your faith in modern prophetic leadership, right? I'm also willing to bet. And this is not true for everyone. I'm not making a universal claim. I'm not trying to put everybody in a box. But I'm also willing to bet that there are moral teachings of the church where let me put this. I'm going to back up. Put it this way. I'm willing to bet that your moral taste buds have also shifted.
Okay, that makes sense.
And your mind is trying to catch up.
So I'm a mom, or I'm a dad, I'm a brother, I'm a sister. Yeah. And I'm encountering experiences where I really care about this individual, or I'm on the opposite end. Yeah. And I'm like, these people are crazy. Like, I know A, and if you knew B, then you wouldn't see it. You'd be persuaded like me, right?
And it turns out that's not true.
And what you're saying is
they can read all the same books you've read and still not be persuaded.
So as a parent, you can love them. You can continue to love them.
Right. And you continue to share.
But I'm saying, What does it look like to approach it?
Yeah. I mean, so I would say certainly share those articles. There's nothing wrong with sharing articles. Nothing wrong with saying, hey, have you considered this? Have you considered that? What I would never tell parents is to stop trying to talk to the writer, not to stop trying to talk to the mind. But what I would say is that ultimately when they change, it's going to be in here first, right? It's going to be, so when
it's so simple, man.
Yeah. And so really what you got to do, what it comes down to is, hey, will you come with me? Will you come attend church? Hey, will you come meet these people? Spend time with them, right? It's about time with people who, who are converted. It's about time in sacred places. It's about time in the scriptures. Just spend time.
Well, again, a faith crisis.
Yeah.
Because I'm telling you, a lot of times, a lot of these arguments are based on facts. When if I get deeper into conversations, it's like, wait, you don't even believe in God. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm like, wait. So like, because I've always had this perspective that I think is so true. You know, Elder Packer.
Yeah.
President Packer.
Yeah.
Doctrine understood has the ability. It's doctrine understood.
True doctrine understood.
True doctrine understood
will change behavior more than the study of
behavior will change behavior.
Yeah.
Right. It's like we're always talking about this is what you're not doing. This is what you can't do. Right. Da. But it's like, well, what do you believe? Mm-hmm. What do you understand? What do you believe? And I was wondering if that has a connection to the moral. Well, the moral intuition.
Here's what I would say. Here's I would put it the way that President Nelson recently put it. I think even in the most recent general conference, he says spending time in the temple.
Spending time
in the temple will do more. And I don't remember the exact verbiage, so you can go look it up.
If you struggle with the temple, then go more to the temple. Is that what you're talking about? That one?
Wait, I think the way I would put it is time in sacred spaces will do more to change your behavior than the study of even doctrine or behavior will change your behavior. I'm not trying to disagree with Elder Packer. I actually suspect.
I agree, but I think it's the same.
But the point is, spending time in sacred
with
spaces.
With the doctrine. Like acting on the doctrine.
Right. Going to the temple and feeling the Spirit there and participating in those ordinances, partaking in the sacrament, right? Participating in those baptisms, doing your ministry, time engaged in the work of the ministry. All those things will have an influence on our heart that will make the doctrine clear to us. Will wipe away the fog that makes us that confuses us about the doctrine, and will lead to behavior change. So,
because it's faith in Jesus Christ. Because what are we having faith in Jesus Christ? Well, we're trusting His promises. Well, what promises did He give us? Well, He gave us covenants. Well, what are those covenants? Well, He's covenanting with us that we'll make it back into His presence. Yeah. That's what He really wants. Right? And so I think Satan does a good job at creating things that we care about, but that aren't the end game. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
It's like,
And so when President Nelson said this for Wisconsin, he said, nothing else in this life will protect you more, and I don't remember that verbiage, than spending time in the temple, right? I found myself wondering why. And then the conclusion I came to was because spending time in those sacred places, that is what will shift our priorities. That's what will shift our tastes. So that when we come out of the temple and when we're going about our regular day and we encounter immorality, it will taste wrong to us because of the time we spent in the temple committing to live these principles, seeing God's priorities on full display.
It's like a visionary thing. It's like the metaphor to me is vision. I love the idea of vision. Things become more cloudy. I like you said fog. Yeah. It's like the higher you are, the more clearly you can see.
Yeah.
But then again, back to the question of truth, right? I believe that it's His house. There's no better place to learn of Him than in His house.
Yes, and this is the one last point that I want to make here that I think is important is that sometimes we come to identify with our moral taste buds. I'm a picky eater. I'll freely confess it, right? I'm actually going to Golden Corral to eat, and I love going to buffets because I can choose my foods right? Like make my selection and make just how I like it, right? But like if I get mayo or ketchup on my burger, I'm like, I don't want to eat that anymore. It's weird. I get it. I have food anxiety, right? But the point I'm trying to make here is that we sometimes come to identify with our tastes, and we fall in love with our own taste buds, and we don't want them to change. And I think this is something that the world is often trying to get us to do, right? Where, so these things don't taste bitter, they taste good. That makes you an ally. You're an ally. That's your identity. That's who you are. This is a virtue. And then it becomes, we fall in love with our eclectic taste buds that are actually far less eclectic than we realize, far less eccentric than we realize. We're really absorbing the taste of our culture, but we're treating it as a virtue instead of a vice. And we like, wow, I am a more virtuous person by virtue of the fact that I look at sin and I think, wow, that's nice instead of that's bad, right? And then, as a consequence of this, we don't want to give it up. We start clinging to it. And ultimately, I think that conversion requires us to be willing to go to the Lord and say again, like I said earlier, make things that taste bitter. Make things that are wrong taste bitter to me. Please make things that are right and good and true taste good to me. And then be willing to let the Lord lead you where he leads you.
I like this.
To give up the moral taste buds you might have fallen in love with that you've absorbed from the culture, and then to embrace something new.
Wow. So you keep going back to this.
Oh, I do.
I think that it's important.
Maybe I'm hitting it with a dead horse,
no,
right?
No, you're not hitting it with a dead horse. I'm saying the taste matters, you're saying. And the way it tastes really depends on how familiar we are with it.
Yeah.
And they can change according to how often we're doing that.
Yeah. And not only does it matter, and this is the dead horse that I'm beating, but this is the whole shtick, right? When you read the CES letter and you find yourself being persuaded by it, it's because your taste had already changed.
It's revealing what was underneath, is what you're saying?
Right. I'm again, not for everyone. I'm not trying to make universal claims, but for many, it's because they were already feeling a little bit embarrassed of their faith.
Yeah.
And the CES letter is, and they may not even realize they were there, but they absorb the taste of their culture. They're already in a position where they're feeling a little bit self-conscious. They've partaken of the fruit, but they're seeing the people in the great and spacious building. And so then they read this CES letter, and it's giving them an escape hatch. And the point is, you're not going to draw them back with rebuttals to the CES letter. That can help.
Hey, this is important.
That can help. But what's going to draw them back ultimately is when they start to realize that the tastes of the world are actually kind of gluttonous.
In the short term.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like cotton candy. I mean, it does taste sweet.
Yeah.
But it dissolves and it just doesn't last, right?
It's when they're going to I think eventually the Lord will often bring many of these our friends and family back, but it's going to be when they start to realize that the things that taste sweet to them aren't actually all that good.
That's the confusing part, because some things that are not good, they actually feel good. Some things that are not good actually taste good.
This is a great example.
Do you know what I'm saying?
This is a perfect example. Okay, so last Monday, I actually designed a family home eating lesson for my children, and it was terrible and horrible, and I'm a horrible parent. But I took a Hershey's bar and I sliced it open with an X-Acto knife, and I replaced it with cardboard. And then I took a bowl of broccoli and I hid a Hershey's bar inside the bowl on the bottom underneath all the broccoli. Right? Mm-hmm. And I gave my daughter a choice. I gave both of them a choice. My son, in a weird moment of I'm going to take care of my body. He chose the bowl of broccoli. And my daughter's like, give me the chocolate, right? Mm-hmm. And then she opened her chocolate bar, and then she throws a 2-hour screaming fit over this. And the funny thing is, I had a bowl of broccoli. I'm like, hey, Penny, would you like to try to eat the broccoli? And she's like, I don't want broccoli, I want chocolate.
It's like Billy Wonka, I want it now.
Right. She's 7, right? Well, you can't blame her, right? But it's funny because
But they're learning.
At one point, I showed Penny, hey, Penny, Forrest and I both found chocolate at the bottoms of our bowls of broccoli. Do you want a bowl of broccoli? And she's like, why do you get chocolate and not me? And she runs out of the room screaming.
But the thing though is,
and I'm trying to offer her, and the whole point of the lesson was sometimes the things that look sweet to us aren't actually good for us. And the things that don't look good to us actually have a treasure hidden inside them because our tastes have not been calibrated, right? And that was that was the message I'm trying to share with them. Sometimes we have to realize and readjust and recalibrate our taste. Maybe the broccoli really is what's ultimately best and ultimately sweetest. And I think the measure of conversion is when you partake of the fruit, does it taste sweet? Because I think for the wicked, and I count myself at times and seasons as part of this, right?
It's uncalibrated. I think that like wickedness is a relationship perspective, right?
Like for those whose tastes are calibrated against the world, they'll take of the fruit and they'll bite into it and they'll be like, yuck, right? They don't realize the great treasure that's sitting in their hands because they calibrated their taste buds against worldly priorities.
Yeah, your taste alters. I like that perspective, man.
Yeah, and so that's what I'm trying to share with my daughter. And the funny thing is, at that moment she was being guided by her taste buds, and I hope in that later that evening, once she calmed down, and hope in subsequent discussions and conversation with her, I helped her realize that the whole point is that we can't always trust our taste buds. We have to educate them.
Strengthen them.
We have to strengthen them. We have to teach them what is right and what is good through sources outside of ourselves.
Well, I think this is a good place to consider this. That's the assumption. The assumption is that life is supposed to be unpainful sometimes. I mean, because sometimes the things that are the best for us, like even with food, the taste, it's not. So maybe it's not even the taste. Maybe it's what it does. Because I'm saying, I'll go off sugar for a long time. Yeah. And carrots taste sweeter.
Yes, they do.
And the like broccoli tastes sweeter. Well, and here, right? Do you understand?
And I'm willing to bet for many people who might find themselves wrestling with matters of faith over things on issues like gender, marriage, or sexuality, or word of wisdom, or whatever the issue is, like lay off Netflix for a while. Give up politics for a while, like.
Which is interesting. That was President Nelson invited everybody to
right. Get off social media for a while, and then after a few months of not indulging in your favorite media, go back and you realize how shockingly aggressive some of the immorality really is, and then you'll start to realize
on my mission when I came home, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I was like, but it's because you're not desensitized anymore, and it's a living thing, right. I remember hearing songs that I had listened to, then I would break it down to, and then I'm in the car and I'm like, dang, I'm not even trying to be self-righteous or nothing. I was like, listen, guys, I know I just got home, whatever, but like, I'm not trying to be weird, okay? Is it cool if we change this, And they were like, oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when I wasn't trying to, you know what I'm saying?
Well, we have this tendency, we all have this tendency, to feel judged by anyone whose moral taste buds are stronger than our own. We have this tendency. Like if somebody's...
Whoa, tell me.
Yeah. So let's say I'm watching Psych, TV show, Sean Spencer, Psychic Detective. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
And someone sits down next to me and like, whoa, that was a crude joke. I'll be like, oh, lay off, man. It's just a TV show, all right? I'll feel defensive because just by them saying, man, that was crude, I feel like they're evaluating my taste a little bit.
That's shame to me.
What?
That's what I think shame is.
Right. But here's the thing, though. But I want to. But
I'm not saying you're shaming them.
Yeah.
They're shaming. I'm saying we can choose to have.
Right. But the truth is, I think that it's inevitable. It's perhaps even a psychological inevitability that when we encounter people with moral taste buds that react stronger than our own, we feel defensive. We feel a little bit attacked by that, and so I think we sometimes believe that anybody with stronger moral taste buds, we start to see them as self-righteous, even when they're not being self-righteous. They're just responding. They're not judging. That person might not be judging me at all. He's simply evaluating the content as he experiences it. He's not judging me.
Yeah.
He's not being self-righteous. He's simply saying that didn't taste right to me. That joke seemed a little bit more too crude for my taste. And quite frankly, he might be right. But expand this to all the other issues out there, right? I think, quite frankly, when we live in a society with very relaxed moral taste buds, anybody with strong moral tastes is going to come off as self-righteous and judgmental, even when they're not. Just by virtue of the fact that they have strong moral taste buds. And so I think part of this is we need to calibrate our taste buds, but we also, I think, need to create space for people with moral tastes stronger than our own. We need to create space for them to be in our society without feeling like, without feeling attacked by them. They add value to us. So here's an example, right? I believe in the family proclamation. I believe that is the word of God. I believe that it represents the teachings of Christ, right? I believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. Not everybody shares that beliefs. And I recognize that in our society, same-sex marriage is widespread now and widely celebrated. And I'm going to have friends and even family, perhaps someday, who invite me to one of those celebrations, a same-sex marriage. And I don't think it's wrong to go. I don't think it's wrong to necessarily to go and participate in the occasion. It's not inherently wrong, right? But there will always be those among us who arrive at the opposite conclusion, who say, look, if this is wrong, I shouldn't be celebrating this. I don't think it's right for me to go. Their moral taste buds respond more strongly to that. And there's a temptation to become self-righteous, judgmental, and reverse towards them. But quite frankly, if their conscience is bothering them and they're like, this occasion doesn't seem right to me, I don't think I should be celebrating this, I think we should create space for that. Terry Olson, he's a colleague of Terry Warner's, another champion of Terry Warner's self-betrayal theory. He tells a story about when he was in high school. And he was playing a part of a character who, maybe he was a pirate, I don't remember, who would drink from this flask with alcohol. It was just a character, right? But one day before the opening night, he shows up and the rest of the cast is they're all quiet, they're gathered together and they're waiting for him. And they say, some of the guys were going to play a prank on you and put real alcohol in the flask. But then we said, hey, Terry's Mormon, he doesn't drink. And they felt bad and we felt bad. We washed this out 10 times. And we want to let you know that it's okay. And none of them shared his beliefs. None of them had any problem with drinking. None of them had any qualms with it whatsoever. But they knew he had qualms with it. And they wanted to create space for a man with moral conviction to live and be honored in their community, right? And so going back to the theme of moral or our gut intuitions, there's always going to be people whose moral taste buds are stronger than ours. And rather than responding defensively, rather than getting all upset or offended by their moral tastes, and saying, "What, you don't think this is good and right?" Say, "Well, I respect that. Let's honor that. Let's find a way for us to continue to be friends, even though your moral tastes respond differently than mine." I think that's crucial in some ways, because as society becomes more relaxed, if we're calibrating our moral taste, but I hope that people will honor that and recognize that, and offer some respect for that. And I think we should offer that respect for others when they're a little bit stronger than ours.
I think that's important. I think it's basically like you don't have to. You just are honest. It's honesty. To me, that is integrity. And too often, even in meetings at church or at work, it takes a very strong individual to just say, you know what, let's look at this again.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to it's not like self-righteousness is more about what you will think about me. Yeah. It's more of, I just can't do this. Yeah. And I'm out. Yeah. And you've seen the experiment where they'll have, I can't remember the exact detail, but basically they'll draw different lines on the board, and then they set up one of the students, they come in, and then it's obviously not the longest one, but the whole class is like, that's the longest one. Yes. And it's really the shortest one. And then the person, in most cases, will be like, yeah. It's just, I mean, I'm hearing what you're saying, that it's just saying,
create room for dissent.
You know what? That is that's not the one, right? Yeah. It's honesty.
Yeah. And also creating room for people to be honest. And also, even if you disagree, right? Like, hey, I think Psych is a fine show, right? But if my friend thinks it has crude jokes and he doesn't want to watch it, I'm not going to judge him for that. I'm going to say, good on you, you know, for honoring your conscience. That's really what it comes down to. So,
well, I like this. I wanted to share this quote right here. The perspective that, like, you know, the world has is way different. And I like this quote from Elder Benson. He's like, the Lord works from the inside out. The world works from the outside in. The world would take people out of the slums. Christ would take the slums out of the people. And then they would take themselves out of the slums.
yes.
The world would mold men by changing their environment. Christ changes men, and then who then change their environment. The world would shape human behavior, but Christ can change human nature.
Yes.
He wants us to be completely different. So what does the world look like if people truly consider this perspective instead of arguing back and forth? What does it look like?
We'll still have rational arguments. I think constructing a good rational case for the gospel of Jesus Christ, for the scriptures, for the Book of Mormon, for our faith, will still be part of the picture. But I think that, and vice versa, people will still launch rational arguments against faith. But I think acknowledging that ultimately the differences that we have are not differences of the intellect, they're differences of the heart, different values, different perspectives, like different value systems. That's what's driving these differences. And acknowledging that and recognizing it is, I think, the first step towards, first off, persuading others, but also for creating space, a pluralistic space of where people can disagree. Because if we imagine it's all the intellect, then if someone else is not persuaded by the same evidence that we have, then it must be because they're dumb. They're deficient in some way, right? But if we recognize that their intellect might be as bright and active as ours, but their value systems are a little bit different, then I can recognize and create some space for that.
I like to ask the question, like, I don't want to say what's at stake, but what happens if we don't really understand that there's differences? What is the worst case scenario? You know what I mean?
Oh, the worst case scenario is that we talk past each other constantly and ever. And we start to assume the worst of each other. But we start to talk past each other because we don't realize that, hey, like, we're really not talking about the arguments. We're actually talking about the sentiments, right? It's not that you are more persuaded by or less persuaded by the blended pizza and I'm more persuaded by the blended pizza. It's that you've never been exposed to it and I have. I haven't really, but you know.
Well, you could.
Right. But the point is that once we realize it's really about sentiments and that the sentiments are non-rational factors and influenced by things like upbringing and culture and political tribe, then we can start to position the multiple parties in the discourse a little bit more effectively and realize and then maybe shift the dialogue away from you're not persuaded by the same facts, so you're dumb, and it's more come to church and see what that does to your tastes. Give it a few weeks, dive in and see what it looks like to you after spending some time with it.
So it's more action.
Yeah.
I mean, it's more invitations for action, But when we don't see it, I feel like it's really just the idea of what you see all over the place.
Yeah.
You see divided families. You see divided relationships. You have people who literally don't talk to each other anymore.
Right.
Because of, they're just crazy. I'm not crazy. They're crazy.
There are people I can't talk with politics about anymore.
Yeah.
Because I've made the mistake of assuming that it was matters of reason rather than understanding that it was actually non-rational matters of sentiment instead.
So then how do we change our own personal sentiment?
Well, first of all, I think we need to develop a sentiment where we see other people as children of God regardless of their beliefs and perspectives, right? We have to learn to love people regardless. There's also developing a scout mindset as opposed to a soldier mindset.
Like curiosity?
Developing a curiosity. Like, walk me through the broader backdrop that leads you to evaluate the evidence in this way. It's all about the broader narrative, right? Right. So the CES letter might not seem persuasive to me, but if I were approaching this from the vantage point of, already being a little bit embarrassed of the eccentricities of my faith, already being put on the defensive for believing in defending church teachings, and starting to feel a little bit like starting to see church teachings a little bit weird, et cetera, and so on, then maybe these arguments start, I could, if I can understand that, then I can say, hey, understanding the non-rational factors at play here can help me to better address the real root of the issue. The real root of the issue.
So what is the real root of the issue?
Again, I think it's the sentiment. And it's not something that I can of myself help someone work through, but I can say, hey, look, I think as long as you're feeling a little bit embarrassed of faith, this is going to be. I'm not really going to persuade you of this. So let's go back to these arguments at a different time. Let's right now. Again, it goes back to what I said before. Let's spend some more time with the scriptures. Not even trying to analyze them from a rational point of view, just spending some time drinking from the stories of Jacob and Nephi and Ammon and Alma and et cetera and so on. Let's just spend some time drinking from their stories, learning these narratives, understanding them and applying them and connecting them to our lives. And after we do that for a while, then let's go back if we really need, if we even need to at that point.
Well, I know it's cliche. I know.
Yeah, it really is cliche.
It is cliche, but I'm just telling you.
It feels dismissive, right?
But I hear what you're saying though is let's look. The only thing that's going to change anything, we could argue about this all day.
Yeah.
But I believe this. Like I think that Alma does this perfectly with Korihor. He's like, look, I don't just know this. I know this. I've had these experiences.
Yeah.
I've seen angels. Like I've had experiences with God, and those experiences have left me unshaken. Right?
Yeah.
He doesn't really like. Korihor is like, here's the truth. Here's this. Well, what about this? And he's like, he mixes things up, and then Alma's just like, he doesn't try to prove any evidence stuff to him at all.
He just says, hey, I've had an experience.
Yeah, they're experiences.
I'm going to give you one too.
Yeah.
But it's very cliche. It's the Sunday school answers, right? Read your scriptures, pray, go to the temple. Well, I mean, it sounds very dismissive to somebody who's caught up on all these rational arguments. Like, how is reading more about the story of Nephi going to help me resolve my concerns about Brigham Young's racism or whatever, right? Like, it seems so disconnected from the what they see as the root of their concern, right? And so it feels dismissive to them. But I keep going back to Brigham Young's story, a man without eloquence, where he had like all the wisdom of the world, all the intellectual arguments, right, were as of naught when compared to the simple, unadorned testimony, right, of a man who had an experience.
Joseph Smith had an experience.
Yeah.
Alma had an experience. Paul had an experience. Multiple experiences.
None of Alma the Elder's arguments worked. Right? None of them had any bearing on Alma the Younger. Do you know what had a bearing on Alma the Younger? An actual experience with God. That's what we're helping people get. An actual experience with God. And once you have the actual experience with God, it changes you on a level down here in your heart, on the matter of your intuitions, your tastes. And then you ask yourself asking different questions entirely. It's no longer must I believe, it's can I believe. And suddenly you start looking into the no whys produced by the Book of Mormon Center, and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Well, I think that's what I feel like people are saying when they're saying, well, keep reading. They're not just saying that'll solve everything. Yeah. It's just, are you spending more time looking at stuff where are you spending more of the time, right?
I know people who had doubts and concerns who went to the temple and had an experience there. And those doubts and concerns were never resolved for them. And guess what? They just didn't matter to them anymore. They never got an answer to their question that would have satisfied their mind. They never got an answer to them that would satisfy their former version of themselves.
Oh, I see.
But they were changed, and the new version of themselves doesn't even need those answers.
Yeah.
The new version of themselves doesn't even need those answers.
Well, it's not just this, they experienced not just a book. They didn't experience a building. They didn't experience a place. They experienced God.
Yes.
Who is in those places, who is in that book.
And when you experience God in that way, nothing tastes the same again. Going back to the earlier metaphor, nothing tastes the same again.
And I love that I am the bread of life.
Yeah.
If you eat of this bread, you shall never hunger again.
You'll never hunger for those things again, but you will hunger after righteousness forevermore. I'm putting words in his mouth. You shouldn't do that to Jesus. But you know,
right. But I love how it connects back to some of the things he taught, right? I'm like, if you drink of this water, you'll never thirst again.
And again, like I'll put that, you'll never thirst for all the things you used to thirst for.
But see, again. I love that emphasis, right?
Yeah.
And I think that we assume you'll never have to eat bread again, right? He's saying that world stuff won't mean nothing to you. Those pains you feel, they won't be painful.
But you'll feast on this.
That's right.
And it will be delicious to you.
Yeah.
And it won't be delicious to you.
Ooh. Yeah. You don't need this. The physical stuff isn't the stuff that lasts forever.
That chocolate bar, you'll taste it and it will be almost sickening to you.
But this is what we're really talking about.
Yeah. But then you'll eat that broccoli. Yeah. And that broccoli will have a pleasant flavor to you because your tastes have changed, because now your priorities have changed, because you are now a new person, redeemed of God, having become a new creature in Christ.
But just like carrots, I'm telling you, when you don't eat a lot of junk food, they taste amazing.
Yeah.
But it's a sacrifice.
And then when you do eat that junk food again, it starts to taste sick.
It really does.
Yeah.
And then your body reacts like it just, it doesn't like it.
And truthfully, like if this is a project of me for the future, right? But if I start to swear off some of the shows that I find myself enjoying, right, and I come back to them months or a year later, it's going to have the same thing.
But here's the question though. What do you really want from the show? I think that's the question we should ask.
Yeah. Or maybe I don't even need the show at all.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying the thing you're trying to get from the show is the thing that isn't going to be fulfilling anyway. Yeah. And I think that's maybe more to consider that question. It's not so much like you're doing that, you're not doing that. It's like, what are you going for? What are you really looking for anyway? Mm-hmm. And you're getting used to tasting that, but it's never going to be fulfilling. Like this will be, like his real word would be. Like Lehi says, it was sweeter than any fruit I've ever tasted.
Sweeter than any food I've ever tasted,
more
right?
Pure.
And when you have been changed of God, all the banquets in the great and spacious will seem hollow to you. It will seem not even appealing to you. And that fruit, which seems so unassuming, so boring like broccoli, will taste delicious.
But the fruit of that we're talking about is his redemption.
Yes.
The fruit, because his focus, he says, I want my focus, the thing that I'm eating all day is you. I want you. Have you seen, there's this YouTube video, it's a social experiment, and it's basically these people in there in a doctor's office, right? And all of the people are in on it except the new people that will come in, right? So every time there's like this bell that goes off in the doctor's office and everybody stands up and then they just stand up and then they sit down. And then the woman who gets there first, everybody else is all in on it, right? Mm-hmm. They stand up and they sit down and she's looking around like, what in the world?
I share that video in my my general psychology class.
Well, so then finally they're like, I guess I better stand up. So they stand up and they kind of look uncomfortable at first and then they just keep on doing it. And then what's crazy is all of those people go back to the doctor and then she's the only one there. And then a guy who is not a part of the experiment, he comes in, she continues to stand up, and then he looks at her like, what are you doing standing up? And then she's like, they said to stand up, right? And so I don't know why, but I just am doing it.
I think the point here is that we absorb through social suasion, through peer pressure, we absorb. I mean, hey, when all your friends' Facebook profile pictures are changing to support the advocate person's cause, it's really hard to resist. It's really hard for you to remain steady in your convictions, to keep your taste buds calibrated. But then the thing is, once you have absorbed a new taste, it's hard not to want to proselyte those tastes to others. So for good or for ill, right? For good or for ill, right? Whether you're being converted to divine principles or whether you're being converted to the taste of the world, once your taste change, you're like, hey, try this. It's like Lehi offering his first thought was, I want my family to partake of this sweet fruit. But it goes both ways. You go to the banquet in the great and spacious building, you're like, wow, so much chocolate. I want my family to participate. It's the same thing, right? But once you absorb new tastes, you want to share those tastes. You want to proselyte them. And to your point, it's sometimes really hard to see when maybe our culture, our moral tastes are being influenced by pure pressures, particularly in this particular cultural climate where it is almost stifling at this point. Where you know what I mean?
You see it everywhere. I mean, like, it's not just the people that are your friends. It's just every time you open up your phone. I mean, you're like, I'm the only one. Right?
I'm the only one who's not on board with this now.
Yeah, and that's what happens with movies. I mean,
it's hard. It's especially hard when I'm the only one with something like where even all my Latter-day Saint friends are now on board with.
Yeah,
it starts to get really hard to say no. But as President Monson taught back in like 2013, in his talk "Dare to Stand Alone," right? Sometimes we are asked to stand alone, to make a stand when it feels like we're the only one, even in our own community, willing to say, no, you know what? That's sin, and I'm not okay with it.
But they oftentimes want to, they if somebody else were to say something, it opens the door.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Sometimes all it takes is one dissenter. Going back to the Lions example you gave, if only one other person in the room gets the right answer, the conformity effect goes away. If you can be that dissenter, you are helping other people who are also want to be cultural dissenters.
And you would be surprised how many people are like, I feel the same way.
It makes all the difference in the world to see one of your friends standing up and saying, you know what, sin still tastes bad. And all it takes is a single voice sometimes to make a difference in the life of someone else.
Listen, this has been very, very powerful. Thank you so much for
your time.
For this. At the end of every episode, I say, I believe that what you said is true, but don't take our word for it. Find out for yourself. This is Let's Get Real. Until next time.